What if I told you that Hitler's most powerful deputy, the man who controlled access to the Fuhrer and signed his last will and testament, vanished into the chaos of burning Berlin and wasn't definitively found for 27 years? That the CIA, West German intelligence, and legendary Nazi hunter Simon Wiesenthal all believed Martin Bormann had escaped to South America? That sightings placed him in Argentina, Brazil, Chile, even a monastery in Italy? And that when a skeleton was finally found in 1972 and identified as Bormann through dental records, conspiracy theorists immediately claimed it was planted? This is the story of the second most powerful man in the Third Reich, and the mystery of whether he died in Berlin or became the Nazi who got away. May 1st, 1945. Deep in the Führer bunker beneath the Reich Chancellery in Berlin, Adolf Hitler had been dead for 24 hours. Soviet forces were less than 300 meters away, closing in on all sides. Artillery shells crashed into the ruins above. The Third Reich was finished. Everyone in the bunker knew it. The question was no longer how to win. It was how to survive. Among those trapped underground was Martin Bormann, Reichsleiter of the Nazi Party and Hitler's private secretary. To the outside world, Bormann was relatively unknown. He avoided photographers, rarely gave speeches, and operated entirely behind the scenes. But inside the Nazi power structure, everyone knew the truth. Martin Bormann was the second most powerful man in Germany. He controlled who could see Hitler. He managed Hitler's finances. He signed off on appointments, policies, and executions. By 1945, some said Bormann wielded more real power than even Heinrich Himmler or Hermann Göring. Now, at age 44, Bormann faced a choice: surrender to Soviet forces and face certain execution, or attempt the impossible: escape from Berlin. On the evening of May 1st, Bormann joined a desperate group of Nazi officials, SS officers, and military personnel planning a mass breakout. They would attempt to fight their way through Soviet lines under cover of darkness. It was suicide, but it was the only option left. What happened next remained a mystery for nearly 3 decades. At 11 p.m. on May the 1st, the breakout began. Approximately 200 people divided into smaller groups and entered the underground U-Bahn tunnels beneath the Reich Chancellery. The plan was to move north through the subway system to the Friedrichstrasse station, emerge, and then cross the Weidendammer Bridge over the Spree River before heading northwest out of the city. Martin Bormann was in one of the first groups, accompanied by Hitler's pilot Hans Bauer, SS Dr. Ludwig Stumpfegger, Hitler Youth leader Arthur Axmann, and Hitler's chauffeur Erich Kempke. They navigated through dark tunnels filled with wounded soldiers, terrified civilians, and the constant thunder of Soviet artillery above. When they emerged at Friedrichstrasse station, they found Berlin in flames. Buildings collapsed. Shells exploded everywhere. The bridge ahead was blocked by Soviet anti-tank barriers and machine gun positions. The group was trapped. According to Kempke, they attempted to cross anyway by following behind German Tiger tanks that were trying to break through. As they ran across the Weidendammer Bridge, Soviet anti-tank fire struck one of the Tigers, causing it to explode. Kempke was temporarily blinded by the blast. When his vision cleared, he claimed to have seen Martin Bormann's body lying dead on the bridge. But Arthur Axmann told a different story. Axmann said he became separated from Bormann during the chaos but encountered him again later near Lerder Station, about 1.5 kilometers north of the bridge. Bormann and Dr. Stumpfegger were still alive, still moving north, still trying to escape. Then Axmann lost sight of them in the darkness. Hours later, around 2 a.m. on May 2nd, Axmann claimed he stumbled upon 2 bodies lying on the tracks near Invalidenstrasse. He recognized them as Bormann and Stumpfegger. Both were dead. No visible wounds. Axmann believed they had taken cyanide capsules rather than be captured. 2 witnesses. 2 completely different accounts. One claimed Bormann died on the bridge in an explosion. The other claimed he survived the bridge, walked another kilometer, then committed suicide. The contradiction was enough to cast doubt on both testimonies. And because the Soviets never announced finding Bormann's body, the mystery deepened. When Soviet forces secured Berlin, they conducted extensive searches for Nazi leaders. They found and identified the burned remains of Joseph and Magda Goebbels and their 6 poisoned children. They recovered what they claimed were Hitler and Eva Braun's bodies. But Martin Bormann, nothing. No body. No confirmation. Just silence. In fact, the Soviets actively fueled speculation that Bormann had escaped. They interrogated witnesses who provided conflicting accounts. They never publicly stated whether they believed Bormann was dead or alive. This silence lasted for decades, creating exactly the kind of uncertainty that allows conspiracy theories to flourish. Some historians believe the Soviets deliberately kept the mystery alive for propaganda purposes. If Bormann was alive somewhere, it justified continued vigilance against Nazi remnants. Others think the Soviets genuinely didn't know what happened to him. The chaos of Berlin's final days meant thousands of bodies went unidentified. Perhaps Bormann's was among them. In October 1946, the International Military Tribunal at Nuremberg put Martin Bormann on trial despite his absence. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence of his war crimes: involvement in forced labor programs, persecution of churches, implementation of the final solution, and signing execution orders. Bormann was convicted of crimes against humanity and sentenced to death by hanging. But he wasn't there to hang. The trial proceeded on the legal assumption that Bormann might still be alive somewhere. His attorney argued that Bormann was dead based on Axmann's testimony, but the court was unconvinced. The death sentence stood, waiting to be carried out if Martin Bormann was ever found. This official uncertainty, a major war criminal convicted but not confirmed dead, made Bormann one of the world's most wanted fugitives. Almost immediately, reports of Bormann sightings began flooding in from around the world. In 1946, witnesses claimed to have seen him in a monastery in northern Italy, then Argentina, then Chile, then Brazil, Denmark, Spain, even Australia. The sightings were constant and came from seemingly credible sources: former Nazis who claimed to have seen him, intelligence operatives, and civilians who insisted they recognized his distinctive features. In 1964, the West German government offered a reward of 100,000 Deutsche Marks, approximately $270,000 in today's money, for information leading to Bormann's capture. The reward suggested authorities believed he might actually be alive. The most persistent theory placed Bormann in South America, particularly Argentina. This wasn't as far-fetched as it sounds. Other high-ranking Nazis had successfully escaped there. Adolf Eichmann lived undetected in Argentina until Israeli agents captured him in 1960. Franz Stangl, commandant of Treblinka, was arrested in Brazil in 1967. Klaus Barbie, the Butcher of Lyon, hid in Bolivia for decades. If they could escape, why not Bormann? Journalist Ladislas Szabo even published a book claiming Bormann had been smuggled out via Vatican escape routes, organized by pro-Nazi clergy. Author Ladislas Farago wrote Aftermath: Martin Bormann and the Fourth Reich in 1974, presenting documents he claimed proved Bormann lived in Argentina until at least the 1960s. The book included a photograph allegedly showing Bormann meeting with Argentine security officials. Simon Wiesenthal, the legendary Nazi hunter, publicly stated in 1967 that there was enough evidence to suggest Bormann was alive. If Wiesenthal, who had successfully tracked down countless Nazi war criminals, believed it was possible, how could anyone dismiss it? Then on December 7, 1972, construction workers excavating near Loerder Station in West Berlin made a discovery. Just 12 meters from where Axmann claimed to have seen Bormann's body 27 years earlier, they unearthed 2 skeletons. Both showed evidence of cyanide poisoning. Glass fragments from crushed capsules were embedded in their jaws. Forensic experts examined the remains. The dental work on one skull matched records from Martin Bormann's dentist, Hugo Blaschke, the same dentist who had identified Hitler's remains. Blaschke's dental technician Fritz Echtmann and assistant Käthe Häusermann, the same team who confirmed Hitler's teeth, examined photographs and confirmed this was Martin Bormann's dental work. Additional evidence supported the identification. The skeleton showed a healed collarbone fracture consistent with an injury Bormann's sons reported he sustained in a 1939 riding accident. The skull size and bone structure matched Bormann's known physical characteristics. The second skeleton was identified as Dr. Ludwig Stumpfegger, exactly as Axmann had described. In April 1973, a West German court officially declared Martin Bormann dead, ending 28 years of speculation. The hunt was over. Bormann had died in Berlin on May 2, 1945, just as Axmann testified. Case closed, except it wasn't. Almost immediately, skeptics attacked the findings. How convenient that the body was found exactly where one witness claimed, after decades of searching. How convenient that it was discovered just as books about Bormann's escape were becoming bestsellers. Some conspiracy theorists claim the Soviets or West German government had planted the remains to end the embarrassing search. In 1995, British author Hugh Thomas published Doppelgangers, questioning the forensic evidence. Thomas claimed the skull was covered in red clay typically found in Paraguay, not Berlin. He argued the dental work appeared more recent than 1945 and suggested the teeth belonged to someone much older than 45-year-old Bormann. Were the remains authentic? Or had someone's body been transported from South America and reburied in Berlin to fake Bormann's death? These theories gained enough traction that in 1998, German authorities ordered DNA testing. Mitochondrial DNA was extracted from the skeleton and compared to DNA from a living maternal relative of Martin Bormann. The results were published in the International Journal of Legal Medicine and were definitive. The sequences matched perfectly. The probability of the skeleton being someone other than Martin Bormann was astronomically small, approximately 1 in 10 million for the general population. The DNA evidence should have ended all debate. It didn't. Die-hard conspiracy theorists simply incorporated it into their narrative. Perhaps the DNA was faked. Perhaps the relative provided false samples. Perhaps the entire German forensic establishment was part of a cover-up. No amount of scientific proof could satisfy those committed to believing Bormann escaped. One final twist came from Reinhard Gehlen, former head of Nazi military intelligence on the Eastern Front, who claimed in his memoirs that Martin Bormann had been a Soviet spy. According to Gehlen, Bormann had secretly provided information to Moscow throughout the war, and when Berlin fell, the Soviets evacuated their valuable asset to the USSR. This theory has been largely dismissed by historians. There's no documentary evidence supporting it. But it added another layer to the Bormann mystery. Perhaps he didn't escape to South America at all. Perhaps he went to Moscow, protected by Soviet intelligence, living out his days as a hero of the Soviet Union. The theory explains why the Soviets were so silent about finding Bormann's body and why they never confirmed his death for so long. If they knew he was safely in Moscow, of course they'd keep quiet. So what's the truth about Martin Bormann? Did he die in Berlin in 1945, or did he escape to live in hiding for years, perhaps decades? The scientific evidence is overwhelming. The 1972 skeleton matches Bormann's dental records perfectly. The injury to the collarbone corresponds to his known medical history. And most convincingly, the 1998 DNA test definitively proves the remains are Martin Bormann's. Forensic science has spoken. Bormann died in Berlin on May 2, 1945 by cyanide poisoning, just as Arthur Axmann testified. Yet the conspiracy theories persist. Why? Because Martin Bormann represents something larger than one man's fate. He symbolizes the uncomfortable truth that many Nazis did escape justice. Eichmann lived free for 15 years, Stengel for 22 years, Mengele for 34 years before drowning in Brazil. If those monsters escaped, why not Bormann? The persistent belief in Bormann's escape reflects our desire for more satisfying endings. We want to believe that the second most powerful Nazi was hunted down and captured, not that he simply committed suicide in the chaos and his body lay unidentified for 27 years. That feels anticlimactic, unsatisfying. So we create mysteries to make the story more dramatic. But history doesn't care about satisfying narratives. Martin Bormann, the bureaucrat who facilitated genocide from behind a desk, who signed death warrants with mechanical efficiency, who wielded enormous power without ever becoming famous, died as he lived in the shadows. No dramatic capture, no trial, no justice, just a cyanide capsule on a dark Berlin street and an unmarked grave that took decades to find. His story connects to everything we've explored in this series, from the Thule Society's occult origins to Hitler's death in the bunker. Bormann was there for it all, the ultimate insider who witnessed the rise and fall of the Third Reich. And when it ended, he chose death over capture, becoming one final mystery in a regime built on secrets. The DNA doesn't lie. The forensics are conclusive. Martin Bormann died in Berlin. But the legend of his escape will probably never die because it's more compelling than the truth. And sometimes, legends are harder to kill than the men they're about.